Number one, thank you, Denise, for setting this all up. And Pam, is Pam still here? There she is. Setting up with Special Agent Gibbons and bringing that in. If you're not as scared as I am, then you weren't listening.
Just pull the microphone towards you.
Okay.
Okay.
Lawyers with microphones, you haven't learned, have you? We know we're at war, and we're largely out there by ourselves. So don't think that they're not getting better and better. Think about when AI comes. So you want the left of boom is I can't emphasize that more and more. You don't want to be right of boom. By gosh, you want to be left of boom. That means you haven't been hit yet, because we're all getting hit, and we're all going to get hit more and more in more sophisticated ways. Don't think we're not. And it's going to be interesting to see where it ends up. Is it going to end up? Amanda and I were talking. Do we go back to checks? It's getting so bad and so fraught with liability. But that being said, I'm going to get off my horse here. I'm going to introduce my panel, which I have a star panel. Amanda to my left, Amanda Keeson. She's with Bentley, Goodrich, and Keeson. She's been practicing litigation. She's actually board certified for about 10 plus years. Went to college at Skidmore and JD at Charleston College of Law. So I'm sure she ate a lot of good food while she was eating in there. To my immediate right is Irma Shearer. She leads the I think Tampa and Sarasota Compass, Florida, and she's from Miami, but she has 20 plus years experience in probably more different things than all of us put together here. So she's got a very impressive record from mortgages to management to real estate to all in between.
Sounds about right.
So, and then lastly, Amy Concilio right over here, Williams Parker. Again, vast experience, 10 plus years. She started litigation that she saw the light of going through transactional. No offense to you, Amanda.
Take it.
Okay. But FSU and then Nova. So obviously I'm with good company here. I'm moderating good company, I guess is a better way to say it. With that being said, I'm just going to go right into it. And if anybody has heard me talk, I really like to do a fluid presentation. So if we start some issues and you want to throw up your hand and talk about things, we can certainly go off on any tangents. But first and foremost, let's talk about some recent fraud that we're seeing in transactions. And Amy, why don't you tell us what the what issues are regarding title companies and agents are seeing?
Sure. Everybody hear me? Is it on? Okay.
Are we on?
Is it on? I have a pretty loud voice, so.
I like to keep mine only on so you can hear me.
I knew that was your game. Okay, so hi everybody. Again, like Garrett said, if you're not scared yet, by the end of our panel, hopefully you will be. The main issue I think that we're seeing as title agent, closing attorney, whatever you want to call us, are vacant land contracts with fraudulent sellers. So how many people have already been involved in a situation, vacant land, fraudulent seller? Okay, so not as many as I would have thought, because this is a very, very common thing we're seeing now. So what happens is we get a contract in, seller is, say, Garrett Barnes. Garrett Barnes owns a nice little tract of land out in Mayaca. It's vacant, right? So Garrett signs contract, fake, I'm gonna put Garrett in quotes, right? Garrett signs a contract to sell to Amanda. Garrett fills out his seller information form, gives a phone number, gives an email, garrettbarnes34567@gmail.com. Pick up the phone, Garrett doesn't answer. Call again, Garrett doesn't answer. Please send Garrett an email. Garrett sends me an email back right away. Sorry, my job is really busy all the time. I've got a lot of meetings, so it's best just to email or text me. Okay, that's fine. Just email and text. So then, everything's rolling along smoothly, no mortgages. Of course, Garrett doesn't have a mortgage, clear title. And then we get to closing. Garrett says, well, I'm going to sign remotely, if that's okay. Sure. Okay, we'll send you all the documents. Do you need us to set up a notary for you? No, I've got it. Thank you, though. I'll just mail the documents back in. Day before closing, I get my original documents back. I've got my deed signed by Garrett. I've got an affidavit signed by Garrett. I'm good. I close the file. Garrett sends me wire instructions. They're fine. I called Garrett. He said, or I text Garrett, right? Because I can't call him. Text him. He says, yep, that's it. Send my wire. Garrett gets paid. Never hear from Garrett again. Well, meanwhile, Amanda goes, starts building on the property. The real Garrett comes by and says, what are you doing? I didn't sell you this land. I'm sure you did. We had a whole closing. Williams Parker did the closing. They talked to you multiple times. No, Garrett never knew, never was advised, never got a letter in the mail. Garrett had no idea that his property was sold out from under him. And it's happening a lot. So I haven't really been in this industry as long as some of the people on this panel. I've been doing closings for a little over 2 years now, and I've already seen it multiple times. So that's kind of big picture that I'm seeing, and there's ways to avoid it. We've come up with ways to avoid it. We'll talk about some of those today, but that's just something, vacant land, yours should go up.
Absolutely.
But that's at the minimum. They can always start with easy, then they expand into it. Have you seen anything different? Are you seeing the same, Irma?
No, about the same. I always believe if it looks funny, smells funny, it's probably funny, right? So if they're telling you I need to close quickly, they're communicating by just email, just text. You know, we are very fortunate that we're able to get on a Zoom, Google, whatever you call it, and we can talk to anybody across the entire world. So that to me is the first red flag. Have you physically actually spoken to them? They're getting clever, and I think we were chatting about how AI can potentially be even scarier, right, as we move forward, because there will be other ways they can falsify identification. But I do believe if it smells funny, it's usually a red flag. So if they call it, you know, you're never able to physically connect with someone, it's a flag. If they are abroad, they don't need a notary, those are all flags. How many of you use WhatsApp? Okay, I mean, is WhatsApp fraud? No, but it is a medium that they use. So, you know, if you get that communication, and I'm sure, because even I get them, you know, I have $1 million to spend, I'm in China, here's my ID, can you send me property? That's your client. It's a flag, right? Because could it happen? Absolutely. I'm not saying it can't happen, but the likelihood that someone with $1 million, $12 million, $15 million, where our ears are like, ooh, there's a deal, right, are going to communicate just through WhatsApp to a random, you know, agent is very unlikely. So it goes back to the same. If it smells funny, you know, it's pretty. And we have social media. Google them, look them up. LinkedIn, you know, typically they don't go that far as to create. Typically.
Amy, what are some of the other red flags that you see out there that Irma hadn't touched on?
She pretty much got a lot of the red flags. I mean, like I say, you know, for sale by owner, right? So the seller doesn't have an agent. It's not always a red flag. I have had a situation where there was an agent involved. Picked up the phone, I asked the agent, hey, have you spoken with your client? And the minute he said no, I knew it was a problem, right? So always talk to your clients, always, always, always. Price too low, you know, that's a red flag. Vacant land in general right now is such a red flag that the title underwriters all have lists of these properties. They don't try just once. They try over and over and over. They're trying to find the buyer that's not going to do their due diligence. So there are lists out there of vacant properties that have been involved in fraudulent sales. So keep that in mind. Have a closing agent you work with a lot before you have a buyer sign your contract. You know, just reach out really quickly, say, hey, is this on any of your lists, right? You know, no offense to any of the men in the room, but as women, we like to dig, right? We're good at it. So like Irma said, use Google, use LinkedIn, do your digging, and find out whatever you can about the property and about the seller.
Are you finding most of these properties that are in fraud like that are out-of-state owners?
They pose as out of state and in state.
Yeah, I've seen both.
People who own the property are actually out-of-state.
Well, not
Yes.
necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, they're all over the place and they're good. I know we've been involved with at least 3 this year alone. So don't think this is just, yeah, that's never gonna happen to me. It's happened. And aware, a smell test and verification, I think, is the moral of the story on the red flags. Go
I
ahead.
think her question was, are the victims, the people who actually have title to the property, are they out of state?
Sometimes.
Is that somebody who's more victimized than local people?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Because think about it, it's vacant land and there, you know, my active parcel is just sitting out there and, you know, they pay taxes on it and usually they find out when, the tax bill comes and their name's not on the deal, on the, tax bill anymore. You know, that's what, two of the many that I got, Garrett, my name's on the tax bill, what the heck is going on? And
Yeah.
they didn't know.
The recent one I had, it was a local person. They actually owned a local company in Mayaca. So it was very easy for me to Google their name. Their company came up and I just called the company, right? I didn't have his personal cell phone number, so I called the company, got right to him. He kind of chuckled when I asked him if he was selling his property and said, "Oh no, is this happening again?" I said, "Yes, it is."
Yeah.
So,
Dig, like you said, I mean, that's a very good, point. And smell test, you know, you kind of gut feeling it, use it. Yes, ma'am.
How do they, let's say you catch a transaction before it closes, or do you then report it to FBI or somebody how do they catch the bad guys? And are they typically US bound, or are they here, are they stateside?
So you report it to the FBI. Sometimes there's success, kind of like how Special Agent Given said, and sometimes there's not. Luckily, if the title company catches it, or again, if at the broker level they're like, "Ooh, this doesn't seem right," we're able to report it. They're everywhere, right? They're not necessarily here in the US, they could be. They're very undetected, under the radar, so it's very hard to catch them, but at least we can prevent it and stop it at that point, so.
Yes.
I'm new to real estate, so I'm not sure the answer to this, but say that happens and the person purchases the property and the real owner has no idea who actually owns the property in that case.
That would probably be a good one for Amanda. Not the feel you left out over here.
Well, I mean, that's the million-dollar question, and really it requires a court to adjudicate title. So your options in that particular situation are really to have what's called a quiet title action, which is when the real owner would essentially bring a lawsuit asking the court to declare that the recent title has been received, as a result of fraud. So the court is quieting title in the name of the real owner. The good news is that the real owner, in this case, using Amy's example of Garrett, would be entitled to collect on his title policy. So that does protect him. And what we've seen when we've had to litigate these cases, there's actually an issue up front, who does in fact own this property, because somebody's saying, "Hey, wait, I'm the real owner," and we've represented the buyer who was a real buyer, tendered the purchase price, received a title policy, so his title policy ultimately ended up paying him for the value of the property, but it's not going to cover costs that you've paid for purposes of designing a new home or building a new, starting to build a new house, things like that. So the people who are victims of the fraud, meaning the buyers that are victims of the fraud, usually are protected by their title policy, but the real owner is going to have to file a quiet title action in order to clear that fraudulent deed off of the public records.
Very, very sticky, very time consuming, and very expensive. So it's not fun.
And I would point out that the way that the title companies are able to determine who the actual owner is generally by asking them for proof of payment of the property taxes. So if you're concerned about a potential seller of a vacant lot, I think the easiest thing to say is, hey, because of the regulations associated with selling and listing vacant land, I'm going to need you to send me the last 5 years of proof of your payment of property taxes. If they can't do that, then they're clearly not the owner of the property. And that doesn't mean sending you the property appraiser tax collector's website saying, see, look, it's been paid, it means here's the copy of my check that I wrote, or here are my bank records showing that the deposit came out of my bank account.
This is a great segue into our next one. There's a couple of questions over here. Everybody good?
Can I ask?
Yes.
Are brokerages assuming any of the liability, are we getting sued for this, brokerages? And how do we guard against that? Can you repeat?
The answer is yes. Everybody gets
Yes,
sued.
yeah.
We're gonna,
Repeat the question, we can't hear.
Who's getting sued because of this? Are brokerages getting sued because of this? And Amanda, why don't you take it, and then Irma, why don't you address it?
Okay,
You're probably
so-
experiencing it too.
yes, so generally whenever something goes awry in a closing transaction, anybody and everyone who can get sued is going to get sued. It's gonna be, you know, the seller, the broker, the agent, the closing attorney, the title company. It could be the bank that received or remitted the you know, if it's a situation of wire fraud, they're going to get sued. Now, you know, certain parties that get sued will automatically get dismissed. Generally, a bank is gonna get dismissed under certain circumstances, but for purposes of your question, you know, and we'll talk in more detail, I don't wanna get too far ahead of the flow here, but there are ways that you can protect yourself. There's nothing you can do to prevent yourself from getting sued, however. And, you know, your insurance policy it depends on what type of issue it is. Wire fraud, your insurance is not gonna cover you for that. So broker's policy is not gonna cover for wire fraud. There are other situations that could be covered, it just depends. But the unfortunate thing is that, you know, you're never gonna insulate yourself from the possibility of getting sued, but there are certain things that you can do that will drastically prevent associated liability in the event that something goes wrong.
Thank you. Irma, why don't you expand on that too?
And kind of to reiterate, everybody, right, becomes part of that situation. If you did as much due diligence and did everything you could, okay, and can document that, at least you have a case. Doesn't mean that you're not gonna get sued, right? But, you know, it falls also under errors and omissions. Did you do your due diligence as an agent or not? Your errors and omissions will not cover it, okay? Because it now goes under wire fraud, and that is subject to a lot of other pieces. So kind of to Amanda's point, it just depends what all the different actions up to that day, what that looks like. If you have all your ducks in order, that's why I said if it smells funny, looks funny, make sure you're doing your due diligence to validate, use your resources, your title companies, your attorney firms also, to make sure they are who they are, because you cannot protect yourself. This is the world we live in, just like there's wire fraud, there's bank fraud, there's ID fraud. I mean, that's just the world we live in. But you can make sure that you take the necessary steps and not just, you know, let's just get the property sold, never spoke to the person, never connected with them, and then think, oh no, I did everything I was supposed to do. Well, did you?
Yes.
So you've mentioned a list. I know that my broker has circulated a list. Is there a comprehensive list somewhere?
Of what? No, not really. You know, each title insurance underwriter, they have their list of the properties that have come through their pipeline. You know, as an attorney firm handling closings, we are creating a list that is everything that comes through our pipeline. There is not a master list out there that I know of.
The title companies do maintain, there's also associated fraud with notary stamps. And so you'll see situations where somebody in an embassy in the UK gets their notary stamp stolen. And then suddenly they're appearing on all of these, you know, deeds transferring property. Those types of things are kept on a list by the title company, so they do keep track. Anything where those notaries appear on, it's automatically going to get flagged. But yeah, I mean, for your point, you're going to have to reach out to the closing agent to see whether that property's on their list.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, would you say that the values are below market value, that like sometimes it's too good to be true, would that be kind of also another red flag?
Amy, or Irma, I think you've addressed that. The answer is yes. It's
Yes.
typically, because they want a quick sale.
Quick sale,
Quick close.
below value, you know.
That's one of the indices of it, yeah.
Yes, buyer fraud does take effect, somebody gets $250,000, is anybody insured title company if it's their error? So
No.
there's nothing.
Hold that, we're gonna hit that in just a minute, so we're gonna get to insurance in just a minute and some other precautions. Yes?
My buyer wants to look for vacant land, so if I just search in the MLS, are we safe?
Not always, but you gotta do your job and do your profession. And just go in there with eyes wide open, and if it stinks, start doing some investigating. That's pretty much it, yes.
One more question, I don't know if it's related to this, but we see some fraud on leasing or rental property. Is there anything we can do about that?
Why don't you, one of y'all take that one?
Go for it.
Yeah, I can take it. So before I got into the world of closings, I handled mortgage foreclosures, right? And we saw that a lot in the foreclosure boom, 2008, 2009, because people abandoned all of their properties. People would come in, act as fraudulent owners, lease the property, make money, even though they didn't own it. I think you're in the same boat, right? You need to get the owner on the phone, the landlord on the phone, maybe a Zoom, make sure they're a real person. When they sign the lease, check the lease with any other documents in the public record that maybe they sign. Again, just do some due diligence. But yes, there are fraudulent leases out there as well.
We're talking about some really good precautions. Do y'all have any other ideas about what precautions you can do? And Amy, once you start, and then Irma, once you mop it up.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So by the time the contract gets to me, right, there's a lot of steps that can be taken before then. But if those steps are not taken, or if I receive a contract for sale by owner, I'm immediately ordering title. Like we said, these are usually quick close sales, but even if I have a closing date 60 to 90 days out, I'm gonna put my title order in immediately, because my underwriter, before they do any work, before they waste their time, they're gonna tell me, hey, this is on a list, are you sure you have a real seller? At that point, then I'm gonna do my due diligence, and I'm gonna dig a little further. One other thing that we do is we try to control the notary. So even if my seller says, oh, no, I have a notary. No, I'm gonna set you up with the national company that we work with, that we know vet the notaries, to make sure that their license is valid, to make sure we're getting proper IDs. We have a form that goes out with our remote signings, to where I'm gonna get back a notary's name, address, and phone number, so I can give them a call if I think that anything is a little off with the signing. Again, speak with the seller on the phone, jump on a Zoom, just say, hey, just want to make sure everybody's on the same page with the logistics of signing. Get a face in front of your face, even if they're in a remote location. We all know anybody can get on a Zoom, and you can have a video on a Zoom. Nobody's camera is broken at all times, so get them on camera and make sure they actually exist. And those are things that we're going to do before we actually close the transaction.
Irma, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I've had, actually yesterday we had this topic in office as well, and one of the best tips I've heard so far is sending certified mail to the legal owner of the property. Because typically they will, if you ask them to call into the office, we're selling your property, they're like, what are you talking about? So that's a great way to get that actual owner to give you a call. So that's a great one. The other thing is, if they're local, which isn't always the case, look that address up and see if you can get a phone number, or, I was an agent once and I was crazy, I'd show up, like, hey, but I mean, if you think it's fraud, you're gonna do it, right? Because it's your time, it's your energy that's gonna be wasted, and you're going to impact also a buyer or seller, depending on the side that you're on. But I think, we have to be extremely grateful for the internet, because it allows for us to look for a lot of this stuff that wasn't accessible, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So you just gotta really do your research. I think that's the first place to start, especially with vacant land. I've noticed also that a lot of the owners, these are investment properties and land that they purchase, so they're easily found on LinkedIn, and you can chat through there and ask, and actually get a response fairly quickly as well.
Great, thank you. I got one question for Amanda, but one of the things that we do is, if we smell something, we're doing a lot more and more, is scan me a copy of your driver's license and email it to me with redacted numbers, and that scares them off because they don't have it and they can't produce it, that type of thing. And if a notary is, we control the notary. That's our moral of the story these days from our office. We have to control the notary, otherwise we won't do it. But in the past, we said, well, send the notary certificate or the license, and if that doesn't happen, we know it's a scam too. But Amanda, what happens if a deal goes through with a fraudulent seller? Is there, walk us through a little bit on that, if you please.
Well, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. I mean, your only options litigation-wise to clear title is the true seller has to bring a claim to quiet title against the property to get rid of that fraudulent deed. So you can't let it sit out there. It's not enough for somebody to simply say, oh, thank God I found out, guess what, everyone, I'm the real owner. You have to clear title to that property. And then to the extent your buyer is the victim of fraud, they're gonna have to make a claim on their title policy.
Or some other mechanism, like insurance. Like if they have a claim against the title company for just doing a lousy job and didn't follow up.
True.
Is that a possibility?
It could be. I mean, generally, it's not an issue of failing to identify a cloud on title. It's more an issue of somebody was successfully able to perpetrate the fraud. But the title company, I mean, from what we have seen, they're not even. I mean, they're just going to write you a check. They're not arguing about it. They understand that it's fraud, especially if it's these issues with vacant lots, or a notary stamp that was stolen and then used. So they're not thankfully giving people a hard time. They're going to pay out on the policy and they're going to move on.
And that's what happened to our last one. We didn't have to do a quiet title action. We got, the buyer got compensated through the title company and the title policy, and then deeded that interest, whatever it may be, back to my seller. So we were able to do it without court action.
Correct, yeah, and we've done that as well. So if a title policy has paid out to the buyer that unwittingly bought a property that the seller didn't own, there's not a circumstance in which they get to keep the property and have received the money. So the only way that works out is they either have to deed it back or the seller would have to quiet title.
Thank you. Let's, yes?
So if it's a fraudulent seller, don't you always require a copy of the driver's license? You touched on that, like not before the signing, but are they creating false identifications and sending those back in with the signed documents as well?
They're getting better and better and better.
Yeah, I'm just curious about that, I guess.
And I get pushback. I'm not going to give you my license, and this is an out of state or out of that's privacy issues.
And then they say, I showed it to my notary.
Yeah. And the notary's in cahoots. Remember, there's got to be a cahoot notary, or the seller has got a whole system internally.
Yeah, because usually they're required to send a copy of that back. I guess this probably is not something worth asking right now, but there being more and more payouts and more suits with all of this, is it safe to assume that the cost of title insurance is probably going to?
Not cost of title insurance, the premiums are set by the state of Florida. It's called promulgated rates. Now, our costs are going up, but it is a competitive environment, so.
It will be across the board.
At some point, we got to pass that through.
But yes, at some point.
Right.
That
because they're
paying out way more than,
And our costs are going up. Yes, sir.
I think you ought to point out that an owner's policy is not required, and there are a decent number of transactions that are done out there without an owner's policy.
Mm-hmm.
There is no title insurance, and then.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. Let's yes.
Can you repeat that? What is that?
Title policies are not required in a transaction. However, if a lender is involved, it would be. But it is not a required thing. Now, that being said, I'm not it happens in title insurance is used in 99% of transactions. It's not good if it's not, in my opinion. I know a lot of companies will not do a transaction if title insurance is not involved, because the first thing that happens when something goes wrong, you should have had me get title insurance, Mr. Barnes. I'm going to sue you for that kind of thing. So anyway, let's move on to wire fraud. No, you had a question.
How do I protect my landowners? Is it a protection for them to have a small mortgage on the property, or is there?
Who wants to take this one?
I can take it. Unfortunately, there's not a lot that you can do, especially if you live out of state and you're not in a position to drive by every now and again. I know now that at least Sarasota County has a service where you can sign up to find out if anything is filed under your name, right? But at that point, it's too late. Deed's filed. You're done. You know, you have to at some point start a suit or a claim or some. So there's not a lot you can do as a seller or as a landowner.
But I mean, to that point, if your clients do own vacant lots, you should always absolutely encourage them to sign up for that service, because even though, you know, to some extent the damage is done, the difference between finding out right away that it's happened is much easier to unwind than 2 years down the road when there's a new house on the property and now you've got a real issue about, well, how do I get compensated for the new house that I've just built on this property? That becomes a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
And I'm just
Irma, can you add to that?
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna add one more thing. You guys are real estate agents. You're the advocate for the sellers, for the buyers. This is an excellent reason, the same way that we reach out when taxes are coming out, when there's homestead exemptions. You know, reach out to the people that you do know that own vacant lots and say, hey, this is happening, and here's the website where you can register. Here's a website where you can kind of monitor what's happening, because you are the boots on the ground that they rely on, and they don't know until it's too late, right? So use that as to your advantage.
Yes, ma'am. Then we'll go to you, Kathy.
Yesterday I was on floor duty.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Yesterday I was on floor duty and I was passed a call for someone who wanted to sell a vacant lot in Sanibel. And I was really nervous about it because I don't know Lee County. So I started looking in the tax assessor's office and got all the property records and that. And then I searched what had sold in this community and I thought, well, you know, maybe I can do this, but something was setting in my spirit. Because I researched the person and he's from Germany, and the accent on the phone sounded like from India. And I kept saying,
Red flag, huh?
so I asked my associate broker, I said, should I refer this house to someone else? I just don't feel really comfortable. She said, let me help you work through it. So, but he didn't, when I called, he couldn't take a call again. He only would communicate by text. I asked him about 3 o'clock yesterday to send me his email address, and I didn't get it until 9 o'clock this morning.
Yep, red flag.
I think he's creating one, and I think, you know, I almost skipped this class to work on that offer.
Yeah, red flag, but you know, it is business and you gotta explore these things. You know, you don't wanna leave money on the table, but then you ought to listen to that gut feeling. Kathy, and then we'll move over to you.
I just wanted to ask, and what, again, I may have missed it, I apologize. What is the website that they can go, that a vacant landowner can go on to register?
It's just Sarasota County Clerk's office.
And I think Manatee County has it.
Yeah, I was gonna say Manatee, I think Charlotte might as well. So just check with the county clerk, wherever the land is located.
Right.
It's not
That
just
was
for
my
vacant
question
land,
as well.
it's for any property.
It's
Yeah, for
very
any property, right?
Dave, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this is far less common with a home because, you know, you're going in for inspections, you're having somebody unlock it. So that's why we're talking about this kind of a vacant land only, but a service that the clerk's office is gonna provide is for everybody.
That was my second question, I mean,
Okay,
the website.
in the back.
In relation to the Fort Myers or the Sanibel property. So that's clearly, right, a fraudulent situation. And do we just like walk away from that, or like, is there somewhere where you can report and someone will look into it, or do we just let them go? You know what I mean? I know it's difficult to get them, but.
Darren, why don't you answer that one?
I would still report it. I mean, the website
Yes.
was given to you, notify your broker, and they should have actionable steps that they take to assure that it's reported, because my gut says at some point, this will be kind of a larger database where we'll be able to track that, and I'm sure they have access to probably
Please
their own
report
database.
it all,
Yeah.
because Gibbons and his team and the FBI are trying to do what they can to, you know, curb this thing. They
Sure.
can't, unfortunately, we're again at war. And, you know, they gotta have the data and the numbers behind them accurately to have the resources to hit at it. You know, he said he's got 2 people. You know, he probably needs 20. And he probably keep 200 busy.
Well, and I think the point too of you know, I don't think you should spend a huge amount of time trying to solve this crime, so to speak, but notifying somebody allows the authorities to contact the true owner and just put them on notice that this is going on.
Good point.
Yeah, and it won't happen to someone else. I mean,
Dave?
I'd just like to make a comment that everyone in this room should go to the county website and register your name for this fraud, because it's not just vacant land. We have people now transferring title to real property, houses that are built, transferring title and selling them unbeknownst to an owner. If you don't register on this site and that happens on your property, you're not gonna know. And it could be sold, the money could be gotten. So I've encouraged every one of my agents to register on that site. I would encourage you the same way.
Very good advice. Let's move to a different subject, which is wire fraud. And Amy, can you explain the different types of the wire fraud that we're encountering?
Yeah, so this is kind of a lot of what Agent Givens talked about with just different types of email scams, not only with wires, but just email scams in general. So one of the things we're now seeing is fraudulent payoffs from lenders. So we will reach out to a mortgage lender, we'll ask for a payoff, and we'll get one back, right? We'll get one back exactly from wherever we requested it, whether it was an online or, you know, we provided a fax number, they'll send it. But then about a week after or a week before closing, we'll get an updated one. Updated one is not from the bank. So an updated one is from somebody that hacked into our system, hacked into the lender system, somehow became aware of the transaction and has now generated a fraudulent payoff. Payoff is going to look almost identical to the first one, right? They're gonna take that payoff and they're just gonna cut and paste maybe two numbers of you know, the amount to show it's different, and then they're gonna have a different account number and a different routing number to wire to. So that we're seeing a lot. Something to watch out for if you guys ever are looking at a payoff for your clients, if they ever say, hey, you know, can you just look at this? We're looking at different fonts. We're looking at military times on the paper. And then we're looking at, you know, I hate to say this, but you know, the old serial killer letters where things are just cut from newspaper clippings, right? There might be one line at the bottom that just has something a little off. So we're always looking out for that, and we're always verifying payoffs with lenders directly. So picking up the phone, asking them to verify. A lot of lenders will not verify information for us. We're a closing agent, we're not their customer. So we need cooperation of sellers to get on the phone with us and sit the 20 minutes, 30 minutes it might take to verify this information. So I would say just advise your sellers that this might be something that they have to, you know, work with us on.
We're doing it for their benefit.
Yeah.
So
Why military time? Why do we have to go through that?
Because the banks that are here in the United States, when they send us, when they send out payoffs, they're gonna say it's good through 3 p.m. on X date.
Okay.
For whatever reason, when these hackers overseas are manipulating these, it goes into military time. So I would say, I'm not gonna say a bank would never use military time, but the ones that I've seen do not use it. It's just a red flag to look for.
Irma, are you done, or you got some more?
Oh, I was just gonna say also, like Agent Gibbons said, the changing of the I and the L, 1 L as opposed to 2 L's or 3 L's is something to look for in an email address. And again, just remember, the phone is your friend. You know, don't take anything via email. I don't know how many times I have sellers send me their bank account information just in the body of an email. I will tell them over and over, use our secure system. Let me send you a secure link. They try to do it, they can't figure it out, and they just email it to me. Tell your sellers, don't do that. Work with, I think almost all closing agents have some type of secure email system. Make sure they're utilizing it, and just don't freely send information back and forth, whether it's identification information, account information. Just always use a secure system. You know, take the extra 5 minutes, figure out how the secure system works, and then use it throughout the transaction for every correspondence.
Irma, do you have anything to add to that from your perspective?
Absolutely. There are a lot of brokerages that now have that disclosure, whether it's somewhere in the contract as an additional rider. Have a conversation with the buyer and the seller, because everybody is potentially, you know, can be breached. We've had buyers where the day of closing, they're sending money and money's gone. And once it's gone, okay? And if you don't have that conversation that they're going to need to pick up the phone and call the title company to verify, they're going to need to, as Agent Gibbons said, like they're even falsifying the number. You know, so have those conversations, whether you're talking to the buyer, talking to the seller, just say, listen, this is the world we live in. You are going to receive wiring instructions. Please pick up the phone and contact such and such person, because you as the agent know who the contacts are. That way you can kind of prohibit a little bit and kind of stop it if it's happening, because it is happening. I will tell you, we've seen 2 different situations with fraud just last week in our office. So if you don't think it's in your backyard, it's in your backyard.
It's in your house.
Or as he said, in your teapot, coffee pots, all of those things.
One other thing that I will tell you guys also is just let your clients know wiring information doesn't change in the middle of a transaction. That is highly, highly unlikely. You know, closing agents, title agencies, attorney firms, lenders, they're not changing bank accounts on a weekly basis, right? There's a lot that goes into it. So if you have a transaction and wire instructions from any party change in the middle, you better have somebody on the phone confirming that.
Very, very good. We're going to pivot a little bit here and focus on Amanda and her comments on the broker and realtor liability malpractice claims. So Amanda, what type of liability do brokers and realtors have when wire fraud occurs?
Well, obviously it depends on what happens. You know, as we touched on earlier, you will likely, if something goes wrong, you will likely get sued. It's terrible. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It's just the whole point as a buyer who's just lost $500,000 that they wired to Nigeria is they're going to name everybody and anybody they can to try to recoup some of that loss. And if each party kind of puts a little bit in the pot just to avoid having to pay legal fees, or they're concerned about liability, then, you know, at least it's some money back in the buyer's pocket. So, you know, things that, you know, I have litigated these cases that are often malpractice claims against the title agent, but I can tell you, and not to scare you, but I want to scare you a little bit, is that it always usually starts with the realtor and their email address, because oftentimes you're using a Gmail, a Yahoo, or you might have, you know, you might be using the domain of your broker's address. So you might have a, you know, jsmith@michaelsaunders.com, but sometimes you accidentally send from your Gmail account or from your Yahoo. And so all of those emails out there, if any of those are compromised and you send that contract out to the closing agent, that person who's, you know, sitting at back and watching that email account because they've compromised it, now knows who the closing agent is. They know what the purchase price is. They know the email of the closing agent. They know the closing date. And so what they're doing is sitting out and waiting for that opportunity to strike. So they're always going to let the initial deposit go through. They're not going to interrupt that. So the buyer gets comfortable. They're going to send their $10,000, $20,000 deposit. They may or may not call and confirm the wiring instructions despite being told repeatedly to do it. And then what they're going to see is that an email, you know, like Agent Gibbons said, is not only does it, can it look a little bit different, what we're seeing in some of our cases is that the fraudster basically sets up an email address with a free email web service. We see Proton Mail is something that they use overseas a lot. They'll set up an email address, and when they are programming the account, in the to section, meaning how your name appears every time you send an email, they'll put the title agent's email, name and email address in there. So every time the fraudster is emailing you or your buyer, it looks like it's, garrettbarnes@barneswalker.com. So it's very sophisticated, and they will swear up and down that they are emailing you, it's a correct email. And the only way that they can tell that it's not a correct email is once you press reply. If you go into your sent emails, you'll see the actual email that you're replying to. So those are things that if you can educate your buyers about how wire fraud occurs, then they can look for it. So we see things where the fraudster becomes a man in the middle. They're communicating with both the title agent as well as the buyer. And they're getting the necessary information that they need for one and communicating with the other. Or there's just a fraudster communicating only with the buyer and coming in the last minute before the closing is supposed to occur, and they say, oh, guess what, we had a problem with our account, so we're gonna have to use this account now, and they'll get them to wire funds to a separate account. So in terms of helping to insulate yourself from that liability, do not use free web-based email address ever. And always make sure that your computers that you're utilizing have up-to-date virus, software, that you are working with an IT professional to make sure that you're protected. You definitely want to make sure that you're using encrypted email so that everything you're sending or receiving is encrypted. And the worst thing you can do is get in the middle of a transaction by somehow getting wire instructions and providing them to your buyer. That you don't want to get in that mix at all. What we're seeing is that once we have a situation where an agent had been emailed, I don't know if they were copied on the email, where the wiring instructions went to the agent as well, and that account was compromised. So what these fraudsters that we were able to trace back to Nigeria did is they were able to, as Amy was telling you, with the fraudulent payoff statements, they take the PDF with the wire instructions on them, and they basically doctor it so it looks exactly like it came from the title agent. They remove some of the, or change the phone numbers, and then they change the bank account. So it looks like it came from the attorney's office. So that's where, you don't want to be receiving wire instructions, you don't want to be passing them along to your buyer. That is just something that should always come directly from the closing agent to the client. And so, the more you can be involved on the front end, educating your clients, I think the better. Do not assume that your buyers are sophisticated. I promise you they're not. We had an incident where a guy got sent fraudulent wire instructions. The bank kicked it back and said, hey, guess what? This is not the closing agent's account. And he then communicates with the fraudster and says, I tried to send the wire and it didn't go through. And they gave him this ridiculous story about how somebody's out of the office, I'm gonna give you a new account with a new name, and he sent it again. So people are remarkably unintelligent sometimes when it comes to this type of thing. So, the more you do up front, the better things will be for you on the back end if they go wrong.
To put you guys on the spot, do you have anything to add as far as anything the realtors can insulate themselves, or did she pretty much cover it all? Okay.
I think that's something.
Yes.
So you said, with us sending the contract out to the title agent, basically here's a new closing order, here's the contract and stuff. Would it benefit us to call the title agent and say, we want to send over a new order, because I know you use that to set up your new account, but can we give you like the address and a name or something so that you can set that up so that we can send it the initial?
Absolutely. I would say, I personally have wasted so much time on fraudulent contracts, fraud issues, that if anybody in this room wants to call me and give me a property address, I am happy to email a title insurance underwriter and find out if it's on a list. I would much rather spend 5 minutes on the front end and 2 hours on the back end.
Well, I mean, also just to send over that closing order,
Yep.
basically, because usually you open the file once we send
You
that
can send it
contract.
before your buyer even signs the contract.
But you can also send it through their secure portal. So
Yeah.
if you call the office and say, I have a new contract I want to send you,
Yes.
they will send you an email with a secure link.
That's what I.
Oh, yes,
Okay,
right.
Yes.
So kind of
Because
the same.
usually we're sending it to you for you to start that secure
Yeah.
portal, whereas.
Yeah,
you-
the sooner the better,
Okay.
yeah.
And to that point, you know, I know all of you probably have relationships with title agents that you like, and that's who you like to close with. It's important that you choose that title agent wisely. I mean, if somebody has antiquated policies, that's gonna come back to bite you. You want people who are, up to date with all of the latest issues, that are using secure portals. You don't want somebody who's gonna be has wire, instructions out there from 10 years ago that, they're not being sent securely, or who are not educating their clients very well. Or, there are a lot of attorneys out there who use Gmail. That you don't wanna be communicating with a closing attorney that doesn't have that, level of encryption on their end.
Very important. Amanda, what happens if I'm named in a lawsuit?
Well, I will say before you get there, if any of your clients have an issue, where things go wrong, it's not a time to kind of bury your head in the sand. This is something you do want to get in front of. And so if they call and say, oh my God, something went wrong, always tell them to call the FBI, and make sure that you try to mitigate the damages as much as you can. But obviously, if you're named in a lawsuit, as I said, it doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. This is all just kind of collateral damage of when fraud is successful. So you're obviously going to want to talk to your broker. You're going to want to see if there's anything within the lawsuit that could potentially trigger insurance coverage, depending on the allegations. And then, unfortunately, it's something that you have to participate in. So you are going to have to secure an attorney. The good news for brokers is I find unless something unusual went on or something, a broker did something or an agent did something they really weren't supposed to, you're kind of sitting on the sideline watching it play out, and you have to participate when you're needed to, but it's not something that you are, is going to take up all of your time and your money. So it's unfortunate that you may get named, but just know that it does happen, and if it does, you need to reach out and get legal advice.
Lastly, and we'll circle around, but Amanda, is there a typical outcome of lawsuits following a wire fraud?
So just to let you know, the way that the court analyzes whether or not somebody did something wrong in these types of lawsuits comes down to what we refer to as what's the general standard of care in Florida for, if it's a professional malpractice claim, that's going to go to the attorneys. And if it's to a broker or an agent, it's just a general negligence standard, meaning you owed a duty to your client and you failed to meet that duty and the client was damaged. So what the court is looking for are mostly what is industry standard, what is expected out of a realtor or a broker or a closing attorney to do in a transaction to protect from the known risk of fraud. And all the things that we're talking about today are those types of things that you want to kind of check off your list to say, these are the things that I'm doing. I'm not using Gmail. I'm making sure that wire instructions are encrypted. I'm educating my client about the risk of wire fraud, always telling them to call and confirm wiring instructions. You should all have an admonishment automatically on the bottom of your email that directs clients to call and confirm wiring instructions before sending a wire. All of those types of things are kind of what the court is looking at. And it doesn't mean that because people were a victim of fraud that somebody failed to comply with their duty. So the outcome that we've had in cases have been good as long as the attorney and the realtors are complying with kind of what that industry standard is and protecting against that known risk, it doesn't mean you're insulated from the risk. It just means, are you doing everything that a reasonable person would do in the same circumstances?
Right. We're gonna get to you one more second. Somebody had a question about some insurance, and Amy, you and I had a conversation earlier. Is there insurance products out there for this kind of stuff? And is it any good?
And the answer is yes, there are products. No, it is not any good. So 2 years ago, Garrett and I both were at a seminar. They were talking about a wire fraud situation, and the person who got hacked, they filed a claim under their insurance carrier. Well, their insurance carrier said they essentially did not do their due diligence in protecting against this and would not cover the claim. So I think there's so much fraud going on in so many different areas and so many different ways that the insurance companies, like any insurance company, they are hanging their hat on a reason not to cover a claim. So while there's insurance out there, I think a lot of the larger firms probably have it or have had it at one point. It's not a full safe protection.
And it's very expensive.
Very expensive, and the coverage is small.
Yeah.
So it's a very question.
So since there's so much wire fraud, can't we just go back to the good old days when you took checks? I mean.
Yeah.
We talk about that all the time. Yeah.
I was gonna say, you wouldn't believe how many sellers, I tell them, okay, we can send a wire or you can give a check. The problem with the check is that the bank's gonna hold it for 7 to 10 days. And for whatever reason, nobody wants that. Everybody has a plan the day after closing to go blow all their money. So, 9 out of 10 times, of course we offer a check and the sellers don't want it.
Well, and remember that, the reason that we use wires now was because there was a huge amount of fraud associated with cashier's checks. So, it's an ever-evolving problem. It doesn't seem like this is a problem that should be so difficult to fix. I think if there was even a 24-hour delay on the bank side in closings, this would not be a problem.
But what if a buyer just wants to bring in his money to you for a closing and a check? Can he just bring it 10 days before? And
They can, so long as it clears.
Yes.
And then it's ready to go, and then.
The contract says it has to be good and cleared funds.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
Let me just tell you, I was involved in a $250,000 wire fraud a couple of years ago, okay? Not my fault, it's a title company. And I represented the seller. I said, listen, the buyers from Tampa, I don't know the title company, let us pay title. She said, no, let them pay. So they stole $250,000, I got it back. Only because I saw it happen in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And the reason I saw it happen in 10 minutes, I got my wire, my commission. I called my seller, I said, you got your money? She said, oh no, I just got an email that I'm not gonna get it until tomorrow. I said, oh, no. So I called the title company. And she says, oh no, we wired it to such and such. I said, well, where did you wire it? Well, we got an email from your seller at 9:30 this morning. I said, well, I called you at 9 o'clock and said, is everything set? She said, yeah, everything's set. So she changed the wiring instruction at 9:30 without asking me.
Yeah. And the key of that is, as Amanda said, timing. The quicker you can do it, the more likelihood you are to be fixed.
I called the bank, called the FBI.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about getting the money back for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But we got the money back.
Congratulations, you're lucky.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and unusual.
My seller called me every name in the book for 21 days.
Well, you should be thanking me.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank Amanda. Yes, one more question. Back there? You good? Okay.
I just want to say one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
If anybody uses Geek Squad, do not let them remote into your computer. Period. They subcontract this out to India and the Philippines.
Wow.
I got hacked, they wiped me out.
Thank you. And that's just one of the many umpteen 20 pieces of fraud that Special Agent Gibbon was talking about. But thank you very much. I want to specifically thank Amanda Keeson, Irma Shearer, and Amy Concilio for all their time and effort in this, and Denise Pam, Jerome, setting that special agents. Thank you very much, and if y'all have any questions, we'll be here for a few minutes.